Got a question here from Anna Markovic. Hi Zach, here's my question. What do you think about the entertainment industry trying so hard to include Black, Indian, Asian characters that sadly happen to be poorly written and can't serve as proper representation? And what kind of Asian character would you like to see in a movie? Okay, so representation in entertainment for minorities. I think that from an Asian perspective, as far as equal representation goes, I believe that we are equally represented when it comes to how many Asian people you see in a lot of mainstream entertainment roles in proportion to our population in the United States. I spoke about this in an early video on this channel, and Asians make up about 5% of the population, and they're about 5% represented in entertainment, which is about right. As far as how we are portrayed, that is usually the question that I like to expand a little bit on. I think that right now, the entertainment industry, because it's very dominated by a lot of social justice and leftist rhetoric, we're trying to essentially create equality for all. We're trying to basically fill diversity quotas even in entertainment, even if that means writing poorly written characters just so someone of a particular race can portray that character accurately. Nowadays, there's a lot of backlash that happens when people feel like there's not enough minorities on TV, or they feel like there's not enough women that are being portrayed accurately in a lot of roles, because the whole, you know, white people on that dominate the Oscars or whatever is just such a prevalent narrative that is being driven. So that's my thoughts on that. As far as portrayals with Asian characters, from my perspective, I think that with Asians, I would just like to see them in roles that they're not necessarily accustomed to be. Like, don't play an Asian person in a movie just because you're Asian, right? I would like to see either an Asian man or an Asian woman, if they're deciding to act in a Hollywood blockbuster, to portray a hero that any white person or black person could play. What I'm saying is, don't make their character specific because of their race. If the character was written as an action hero, or maybe it's a spy, a government spy or whatever, let's make it about that, but not make it about race. And I think that most people who are actually advocating for diversity in entertainment would also feel the same way. But I understand that there's just this need, you know, this participation trophy, over-lingering idea that we just need to satisfy everybody's needs just because that's the current world that we live in. It's the same even in like the fashion industry, the arts industry, where it's like, you know, all shapes, all sizes, all bodies and everything. We're just trying to create inclusion for everyone. But at the same time, we're missing the mark on something that's incredibly important, which is making sure that people are portrayed accurately and done so with dignity as well. Because, like, I mean, I get that people just want to make everyone happy, but let's not do it at the risk of just trying to fulfill a diversity quota. It's the same with employment. So thank you, Anna, for your question. Yeah, guys, this is my Q&A video that I promised after hitting 50K, so I'm going to pick a couple of questions here and talk about a few things. So it's going to be pretty freeform. You guys know my style. It's pretty open. Let's see here. Gregory Batts asked, do you see Christianity as a countercultural element in society today? While many of my favorite celebrities espouse Christianity, they are often marginalized by the establishment, especially media. On the other hand, you see the occasional pro-life, pro-family marriage in entertainment, but not necessarily for biblical reasons. I welcome that, but without God, there is no concrete basis for the morality they espouse. I guess I wish, both in my own life and the larger culture, that God receive the credit as due. Thank you for your question, Gregory. I would like to expand on that a little bit more. I don't really see Christianity as countercultural. I just see it as something that's always been there, that's coming back into prominence a little bit, because a lot of the Christian values that were typically pushed forward traditionally when it came to the family unit, when it came to maintaining strong relationships with people are starting to see that there are some long-term stable relationships that come out of that. I'll give you an example for starters, right? There was a book that was written by Dr. Meg Jay, and countless psychologists and sociologists have done studies on the aspect of cohabitation. And in this book, Dr. Meg Jay, it's called The Defining Decade, for those of you who are curious. She talked about how cohabitation is not a good idea for people who are looking to get married, right? Now, a lot of people who have traditionally been against something like cohabitation usually came from people who were more religious, because the implication is that if you were living living with your significant other, you were probably sleeping with them as well. With the whole Christian standpoint on that, what they found is that when you shack up with people, that you actually tend to have a less stable marriage because you decided to slide in the relationship as opposed to commit to somebody, right? So the lines become drawn, you didn't really make a commitment to them. As far as the Christianity aspect of it, I think that the morality aspect that you spoke about is true. I mean, when you decide to get married to someone and it's a union between you and your partner and God, right, all of a sudden there is another driving force to your relationship. You are committed to each other and you guys are going to work through your problems together and with God. And, you know, especially when it comes to things like commitment, right, and real love, that's where that is coming back into prominence a little bit. I don't know if I answered that question accurately, but I'm going to go with that. I think that right now it's popular to espouse Christianity just because people use it sometimes to virtue signal, which, I mean, like, I'm a little bit, I don't agree with that completely 100%. I think that if you want to get married without Christian reasons, that's fine. But if you want to be in a godly marriage, you know, with the implication that you're going to serve God with your marriage, then that's important as well. So I don't see it as countercultural, but I see it as coming back into the mainstream a little bit simply because of the fact that a lot of those traditional values are actually going to be more beneficial for long-term relationships. So things like commitment, things like honoring your spouse, you know, working through your problems, right? Those are all traditional aspects or values that were pushed in more Christian marriages that are coming into prominence because we've realized that without the commitment aspect, I mean, what's the point in getting married really at the end of the day, right? So yeah, thank you for your question, Gregory. I hope that helps answer it. Let's see here. I'm sorry if I don't get to everyone's questions. I'll probably do a couple of different Q&As over the course of the next couple of weeks, but you know, let's see here. So Razir asked, would it be possible for you to bring your sibling on your channel to discuss your upbringing? I will ask my brother if he wants to come on one of these days. He might want to keep his identity anonymous for obvious reasons, but that's something I'll ask of him. I'm not sure, but if the opportunity does present itself, I will inquire about that. Thank you for your question. Let's see here. Trying to get to some of the questions that I think I can answer in the best way possible. So Kathy Hagel asked, thank you, Kathy. I know you're a long-term supporter. Thank you for your question. Can even older people be a voice on YouTube? What is your thoughts as you mention younger people a lot but are silent on older people? I think that anybody can be a voice on YouTube. In my previous video about anybody who decides that they want to speak up about things that they care about, particular issues that they want to bring awareness to, I don't think age is a determining factor in today's world. I think that, as a matter of fact, authenticity is more important than anything else. So with older people, I think that if you feel like you want to be more vocal about your beliefs, don't let age be a reason why you don't do that. I don't think that age has any bearing on the fact that YouTube may be a platform that seemingly is populated with young folks, but if you're an older person who decides that you want to be a voice on the internet or on YouTube, I'd say go for it 100%, simply because everybody, you know, both young and old, are on the internet now, especially in the political and social sphere, with a lot of these issues that are being talked about. And it's such a broad platform that anybody can take full advantage of it if you decide to speak up. So, you know, it's not, we're not in a world now where things on the internet are just catered to young people. Older people, I should say, also have a platform for that. So that's something to keep in mind. And I can also vouch for this. Personally, from my own analysis of the people that watch my videos, my biggest demographic are people actually from the ages of 35 to 55, which is interesting, right? Which is followed very, very shortly by like Gen Zers and millennials. So just thought I'd mention that. Thank you for your question, Kathy. Try to get to a couple of questions here just for this video. So this was an interesting stacked comment with a bunch of questions, but I guess I'll just pick one question from Fano Benemsi. Prenatal screening can now quickly tell if a pregnancy will yield a child with Down syndrome. Parents increasingly terminate such pregnancies. Example, in Iceland, almost 100% do so, according to this article. I saw a video by people with Down syndrome, and it was very emotive. When confronted with the valuation of their existence by the healthy folks, they said, "But we are humans too." Do you see this trend of selection prevail? Could the whole LGBTQ dissolve in the possibilities of prenatal screening and selection? And how will the left, with all of their perceived monopoly on compassion and diversity, handle this? Yeah, so this is interesting. This is a very good question. Thank you for the long-winded, question that gives me a lot of context. And thank you, Fano Bamesi, for your question. So to answer that about ableism, right, and everything, we need to understand that when it comes to terminating children with defects, right, this is the interesting thing with the left, because so much of what they believe in is very, very inconsistent. And I've wanted to expand on this in a follow-up video regarding pro-choice and abortion, and sometimes the argument against it. Not just because people have decided that abortions have become an inconvenience to people who are carrying children who aren't ready to have children, but for people who decide that their child may be born with a particular disability or a condition or whatever, that they would actually screen them and decide to terminate them because of those defects. And I obviously don't think that that's the most humane thing to do. I agree that some people may be born with a variety of different conditions, and we should love people unconditionally, especially if you're a parent. However, this is where it gets interesting, and this can be tied back to the original consensus of Planned Parenthood, as well as its founder, Margaret Sanger. Now, for those of you who don't know much about Margaret Sanger, she's the founder of Planned Parenthood, which is obviously the biggest abortion and reproductive rights organization in the United States, and they perform over 300,000 abortions a year. They're typically located in a lot of low-income neighborhoods and communities for a very specific reason. Something that the left usually will not bring back into our view when we talk about abortion and the history of it and where it came from was the fact that Margaret Sanger was not just somebody who was advocating for the extermination of certain people that I won't mention through abortion, through birth control and choosing people, but also she was a eugenics supporter. She was somebody who was had staunch beliefs when it came to eliminating birth defects, and for babies that may be born with, say, things like Down syndrome or autism, to be able to actually eliminate them so that they wouldn't have to deal with those conditions if they were born. Now, obviously that sounds very inhumane, but that's where the hypocrisy of the left comes in, right? Because when you talk about the LGBT community, the progressive community, leftists, and they're all for like combating ableism and diversity for all, and we should love everybody, it's interesting because the very entity, the very idea, Planned Parenthood, the organization that they support for reproductive rights and the choice being a woman, was founded on the idea of exterminating people who are less than other people, of selectively breeding people, which was kind of one of the concepts that grounded the study of eugenics, which was eliminating conditions or disabilities from people before they were born, therefore making it more convenient for the mother and not having to live with the burden of a child with a particular condition, which, as you can imagine, sounds pretty horrible, right? But that was the idea that Margaret Sanger stood behind. She was a progressive. We have to understand that these progressive policies don't have a lot of consistency with leftists. So on the one hand, they're okay with killing babies, the woman's right to choose, and they're against ableism, yet the idea for why Planned Parenthood and for what Margaret Sanger stood for with birth control and abortions was actually sanctioned as the goal to be able to better humans, to exterminate groups of people that they did not consider to be desirable. So consider that for a second. That's an excellent, excellent question, but that's where, when you study progressive history and the policies that came forth in right of reproductive rights, it was not for the intention of giving the woman the choice. It was rooted in the belief of exterminating people that they deemed to be inferior to other people, which kind of goes against the left's current belief system and rhetoric, right? Because now they're all about compassion and diversity, as you talk of, the whole LGBT community, yet granting that right of prenatal screening to deem a person as more inferior to another person is something that is in their practice. So I agree. I think that, it's going to fall apart. I think that this trend of selection will not prevail. I would like to not see this trend of prenatal screening be the reason for why people go forward and perform abortions. But it's something to think about, you know. Right now, especially with the latest passage of the law in Virginia, right, of basically being able to abort a baby even the moment it's born, basically crosses the line. And it's crazy the lengths that people will go to stand by these progressive policies, and it's incredibly inhumane. And all it takes is a quick history lesson to learn the idea of reproductive rights in this country. Abortion, pro-choice laws, and Planned Parenthood were all sanctioned with the idea of wanting to exterminate minority communities and essentially create a superior race, because you would be breeding out people with problems. It's crazy, right? But that is something that unfortunately progressives don't like to swallow, or even if they know it, they understand that what they're fighting for is very inconsistent, which is why when you question people about the history of Planned Parenthood and everything, it doesn't line up, because the left advocates for acceptance, diversity. We are not the racists, we are not the bigots, but the very entity that they support is the antithesis of all the things they claim to fight for. So thank you so much for your question. You know, that really, I might even make a full video regarding progressivism and the policies of it, because that is the current time we are living in. We are living in a society where progressive policies have become so deep-seated in our culture, in our society, with education, with employment, with just a lot of our common belief systems, that we're starting to see it. You know, you don't even have to be completely red-pilled on what the progressives were after to notice that there are so many inconsistencies in the left's argument, especially when it is in regard to the things that vehemently divide people between the left and the right, which is usually reproductive laws and reproductive health and women's rights. So thank you so much for your question, Fano Benessi. I hope that answers it. I don't think that this is going to be a selection that prevails, because it's not. I believe that it's immoral at the end of the day, and I believe that people who actually genuinely love and care for one another at the end of the day are going to be the people that will be able to see through this and not try to push a rhetoric or a belief system that they deem to be more superior to other people. It's just not right, you know? I mean, we've seen what history has done when a group of people decide that they're better than everyone else. The result is always the same. So thank you so much for you guys' questions. I think I'll leave it there for now, but I will do another follow-up Q&A video in the near future. Thank you guys so much for tuning into today's video. I know I answered a few questions here. If I didn't get to your question, I apologize for that, but I'll try to get to more questions and make a follow-up Q&A video. So thank you so much for your support. Be sure to leave this video a like and a comment. Let me know what you think, and I will see you all in the next video. Take care.